On today's episode of Quest, I have behavior technician Paige McCauley. Stay tuned. Life is a quest for logic and reason. It is a quest to find balance between science and faith. Life is a quest for knowledge and understanding. But most importantly, it's a quest for personal discovery. Whatever your quest, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Welcome to Quest. Hello everyone, I'm your host, Todd Fischer, and this is Quest. For those of you that might be new listeners, let me tell you a little about me. I'm the founder of Metatomics and the author of the best-selling book, Metatomics, The Grand Design. I'm a philosopher, a theorist, a metaphysicist. I'm a perpetual pupil of theology, and I'm an expert in comparative religious study. I've also extensively researched the mind-body connection, anatomy, and physiology. I documented over 300 case studies while researching my book, all from a scientific perspective, with cases that ranged from near-death and out-of-body experiences to possession to past life experiences, as well as the metaphysical, the paranormal, and other unexplained cases of a spiritual nature. This podcast will bring you some of those astonishing stories, and in some cases by the people that actually lived them. From time to time, I'll be talking about important, perhaps even controversial issues from both spiritual and scientific points of view. The world we live in is ever-changing, and there's often a conflict between spirituality and science. And I wanted to bring you this podcast to balance that equation. It will show you how we know what we know. And there's still so much we don't know. For me, curiosity is part of what makes us human. It's the joy of discovery. It's what drives us. It's our quest. Paige McCauley joins me today. Paige is a behavior technician. We recorded this interview on June 15th. I was in New York City and Paige is in Nashville, Tennessee. Since we recorded remotely, we do have a few sound issues throughout the episode. That was the day that the cyber attack was affecting a lot of communications. So I apologize in advance for the occasional sound dropouts, but it won't affect you from enjoying this insightful podcast. Today on the Quest podcast, I have Paige McCauley. Welcome to the show, Paige.
Hey, Todd. Happy to be here with you.
Good to have you on. So I've known Paige for a while. I've known her sister. I think I know the McCauley family.
So, at this point, all you have to do is meet Logan, the big old brother.
Yeah. I think I'm just missing one. So we've known each other for a while. I've kind of followed your track through school. And I wanted to get you on the podcast so we could kind of talk about, kind of what social behavior is like and how young people are today and what defines a troubled youth, and just get into a lot of different topics, a little different than our normal shows here. So I'm excited to have you on here. And I wanted to kind of maybe take the listeners back to, where you're from and how you grew up and a little bit about your education and what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, as you've introduced, my name is Paige McCauley. I'm actually a UK alum, so all you BBN fans out there, we can all throw the threes up. Everybody else, I'm sorry. I'm actually 6 months shy of hopefully school ending. I graduate in December for my master's in professional behavior analysis. I currently work with early learners who are maybe on the spectrum or Down syndrome, developmental disabilities. My specialty is actually aggressive behaviors. I stumbled upon the field of applied behavior analysis in Chicago, Illinois, and worked with some troubled teenage kids, and bravo to all you middle school teachers, because I could not do it. or even high school. Worked with a range of behaviors and ages, biggest background and aggression behaviors, and all that fun shaping.
Yeah. So you went to University of Kentucky, correct?
Yes, my undergrad is actually in teaching from Kentucky. I'm now at Florida Institute of Technology.
Okay.
With
And you're living in Nashville, Tennessee.
living in Nashville, Tennessee.
You're all over the board.
All over. 3 states, probably will move again. Who knows?
You got to move where the work is. So, you know, I always try to like make this disclaimer to the audience that because these episodes come out of order, sometimes we're not really too necessarily that topical with current events. But I think everyone at this point will know that we've just come through COVID and quarantine and lockdown, and now there's protesting and riots and all of these things going on. This absolutely must have an effect on people's behaviors and their moods and things like that. You know, how for the lack of another word, how crazy are things getting in times like this for someone in your position?
It's been rough. I'm not gonna lie. I've honestly been blessed with more work. For as anybody can really say, the pandemic and the coronavirus have really been rough on some kids, and been rough on parents, and a lot of people have been stuck inside and lockdowns, and it's been rough. We're getting through it. But slowly but surely.
So tell me, what does a behavior analyst do or a behavior technician do? I'm not even sure which of those is the proper term, but what is the day-to-day like? Or say again?
You could say either. Behavior interventionist, I've heard as well. It honestly depends. Our work title is called registered behavior technician. So it's kind of like an open door. It's like saying you have a communications degree. You can work in places like the School of the Blind in Tennessee, if that's kind of a well-known place. You can work in schools as paraprofessionals. You'd kind of be like, you can work as, what I do is I work for a third-party company called Golden Steps. So we go through insurance. You could work for companies like that, and that's kind of where we are booming right now. And that's where I have been with plenty of startups for getting those one-on-one services for kids with disabilities. So parents will go through assessments with their pediatrician or their doctors, and they'll get referred to a behavioral clinic or a company. So like what we have is we're linked with Vanderbilt. So parents who go through Vanderbilt hear about us and resources about us. And that's really where we're booming right now in my field.
Yeah. And what would you say the typical age range is for kids that you deal with?
I mean, I can't really say because it comes through insurance. So, I mean, we could get any age. I've mainly been with early learners.
Okay.
But I have also had adults and high school kids. So it kind of depends on the area that you're in, the certain kind of clientele that's coming through kind of situation. That's a hard question to answer. I'm sorry, I don't know.
So no, it's okay. So do you generally, what is your process with someone? Is this are you there to counsel? Are you there to give lesson plans to people? Like, generally, what is your approach with people?
So we begin with more of assessments. So we follow, it's kind of like what teachers do. We follow assessments and follow where an individual is and what kind of skills they may be lacking. So if I had a kid a client that is older, I would do kind of maybe not questionnaire things that are as big on academics, but more of daily living skills. So we would look at the assessments that are given there, which is usually an essentials for living assessment. And I would see where that individual is. So if this individual is lacking in dressing themselves, shoe tying, hygienics, that age appropriate, that's where you kind of go. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of like jumping through hoops for parents to get right services right now. We're still trying to get it out there. But everything that we do is very individualized. So it's depending upon when I get a client that comes through, I see what age, see what the doctor wrote about them, because, they get referred to me. So there's already some behaviors that mom or dad or somebody is talking about that they're lacking in, or if they're younger, we'll go into an IEP meeting. So I'll have a teacher and mom, and I'll be able to see the client, and then we'll go straight into doing a observation. So the first times that you get somebody like me, and I'm doing a lot of what looks like play, but I'm really seeing what type of skills that individual has. So if it's a younger child, I may be playing with blocks for a while on the ground, or reading a book to them, seeing if they can do any joint attention with me. And that's like both of us looking at the book, or do I have to gain your attention more? If I'm with some older students, a lot of is trying to pair myself with what they like. So if I have an older client that maybe likes video games a lot, maybe I play with them, and learn where he is, and then kind of go from there and fill in the gaps in these assessments to get them to where their typical peers are. Sure. Or address those behavioral issues that mom and dad are talking about, or grandma. It's a hard question to answer, only because we're so individualized. I'd have to see, what age, where are we? What's the social aspect? Like, what should he or she be learning right now?
Right. So let's talk about kind of these behavior effects. So do you see cases that are results of like a physical condition or birth defects? Do you have environmental cases where the environment has affected them in some way? Are there issues with friends and family, physical or mental traumas? Are these the types of things that you get, or that you sort through?
I want to say, of course, because every person goes through different experiences. So, I've had some kids who have gone through surgeries, and I would still consider that as a traumatic event, especially for a young child who's learning how to talk. Now we have to relearn how to talk.
Right.
I've had other kids with seizures. So we've even had to, I've had to really play with the environment on just being able to go outside and get in the car and go places and give mom a break. So I've been on both. I've been on the nature side of biological speaking, that we've had some extra trachea or, something else that has enabled us to do something that I've had to kind of manipulate myself, maybe made something else inside for them. Or I deal with the behavioral aspects of I want to say the easiest one that everybody can cling to is the mom that always picks up the crying kid, and I need to break that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I see a little bit of we see a little bit of both.
I see. Let's talk for a minute about psychiatric medications. So I often hear that we're kind of in this culture of over-prescribing medications, and that, these days, the common thing is you get a 20-minute evaluation and you get an immediate prescription, and then you return 2 months later
what's wrong with your child.
Yeah, and then 2 months later, you get 2 more prescriptions to fight the side effects of the first prescription. Is this accurate to say? Are we living in this world today?
Unfortunately, yes. I've seen it with, I advocate for kids who can't speak for themselves, and teenagers that can't speak for themselves. And we have unfortunately seen that happen, where they've been on a mood stabilizer and anticonvulsant. I actually have to take a course in that. So then supervisors are now, I mean, we have our own ethics code, and we actually have our own set and practices to make sure this doesn't happen. So like I had to learn about TD and all other side effects that could happen from these drugs. And you're unfortunately correct that is even something that we see in my population.
Yeah.
Kids.
Do you think psychiatrists, do you think doctors are just built to prescribe immediately? That if you make an appointment with a psychiatrist, you're going to get a prescription that day, right? Would that be accurate to say?
I mean, yes and no, because I would like to think that hopefully, their oath as a psychiatrist, if somebody was walking in and didn't actually need anything, I would like to think that a doctor of some sort for humans wouldn't want to push pills, but opioid epidemic has occurred. So apparently that's already been unfortunately proven.
Yeah. How do you feel about alternative therapies? What do you think about yoga, meditation? What do you think about CBD oil? What do you think about these things? Where's this at in your world and your personal views on those things?
I actually practice meditation and yoga almost daily myself. I'm actually doing a capstone project on acceptance and commitment therapy with basketball for stressful situations to help decrease anxiety. So it's funny. I am a scientist, but I also I wish I knew the word. We have a specific word for it, for these type of practices that there's not enough evidence to prove that they're wrong, but there's not enough evidence to prove that they're right. And that's where this also falls in our field. And yoga and meditation and ACT therapy and acupuncture, like all that kind of, I'm going to categorize it for you. That's where kind of it sits for us. And honestly, personally, I practice it. I even, one of the first techniques that I do with some of my clients is deep breathing.
Yeah.
For their own coping strategies. I mean, I have to essentially scientifically take, anxiety and what we call as an intrinsic, behavior happening. And I have to find a way to teach you how to work through it. And the only way I can do it for me is that if I do it myself, and my coping strategies are meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think about CBD oil? I mean, that's like all the thing right now. Everybody wants CBD oil to relax them. What are your feelings on people self-medicating with marijuana and CBD oil?
I'm not going to lie. I've had a few parents with, I mean, I'm mainly with younger kids right now. So I do a lot of parent training, and I've had parents use it and say it helps. I've had parents use it and say it doesn't help. I personally do not use CBD, but I do use essential oils. So that kind of is the same thing to me.
Mm-hmm. Aromatherapy. So aromatherapy helps you personally.
Yeah. So I would still give it. I think, again, it's one of those things it's an individual type choice. If that works for a person, then it works. So I mean, for me, I believe that try it. Why not? So if you can look at the pros and cons and you can see both sides.
Is there science behind CBD oil?
I know they're starting research on it. I've heard professors talk about, I don't think I think it's with everything going on, we have to go through a whole process to be in JAVA, which is our Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, which is, our main research. I know because the popularity of it's being used.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people don't understand that a lot of people want to smoke marijuana to relax, but really the THC causes anxiety in people. So it actually almost kind of has the effect that a lot of people don't want. Where the CBD oil, where the CBD oil actually does kind of relax you in a way. Is that accurate to say? Am I explaining that right?
From my understanding and what I have even seen at doctor's offices, because I'm sorry, my dog is a beagle. I'm really sorry, my dog is a beagle. From what I have read, it's supposed to take the strand of THC out to give you that muscle relaxation.
Right.
That's honestly what I've read. But again, what I tell my parents, I've never personally used it, but hey, if you want to try it and you've really, and they're really not sleeping, it's got a little bit of science behind it right now. Why not try it?
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about let's move toward religion a little bit. So you grew up spiritual and religious.
Christian, yes. I grew up Christian and actually got baptized. I called my preacher, did it myself in 2015, and it was actually a traumatic event that happened. My aunt died of breast cancer, and my cousin had also overdosed, and then my dog of 16 years died. And I think there's a level that you hit and you can only answer so much that I did it myself and I'd do it again.
When you were younger, you didn't experience religion, you didn't go to church, or was something that happened for you a little bit later?
We still went to church, but it was more of how you would think it would be in the 90s, where I didn't want to get up on Sundays and mom would make me go to Bible school.
Because, with the McCauley last name, I expected Irish Catholic, like right out of the gate. I was making an assumption.
My dad, actually, yes, my dad is Catholic, and they're that side, the McCauley side, is definitely Catholic. My grandma's ceremony was actually Catholic, and I forgot how long they are. But my mom was Presbyterian, so they agreed to raise my brother, sister, and I Christian.
Gotcha. Now, are you still religious today? Are you still spiritual today?
Yes, and I've been wanting to go to church, to be fully honest with you, and I hate the fact that I cannot.
Yeah. Has your job affected your faith?
It's tested it, I will say, but that's what faith is supposed to do.
Yeah. Can spirituality help with behavior?
In my experience with myself, because that's the only thing that I can say as a scientist in trying to do that with myself, then absolutely. But I'm also biased because I'm in it,
Yeah.
I'm intrinsically in it. Like I don't need the validation anywhere else. I don't need anybody else to approve of it, because it's my relationship with God. And I value it and cherish it on the level that I do. So it's, absolutely.
Do you feel like in the kind of the health and the medical industry that we have, that there's really a push to remove faith from that? And does science, do doctors, do researchers, do they try to just push religion out of the equation as much as they can? Do you feel like that's a trend? Do doctors lose their faith because they're surrounded by death all the time? Do you sense that in the community?
Honestly, I don't. I want to say no, because I don't want to put that out. I would like to think that I mean, I've been, everybody I feel like has been there before, where they weren't as big into their religion, and today I don't believe that it's pushed, but it's more of, it's not acknowledged. No, I don't think it's pushed, but I definitely don't think it's not a topic we talk about. It's not a happy topic, even a happy topic to talk about. It's one of those that could actually get awkward really quick, and maybe you won't even say anything because I don't want to make anything awkward. I think that has definitely grown in our society, but at the same time, there's weighing on both sides, because I've had a lot of college friends that have gotten really religious.
It's interesting to me that, for me growing up, and, I grew up in Southern Indiana, and you were, in Louisville, the Louisville area there. And, when I was growing up, all the hospitals were like religious hospitals. It was Baptist hospital, or it was Saint
Jewish
something,
hospital.
or Jewish hospital. It was like
Baptist.
religions got behind hospitals so much for 100 years.
Well,
But
it's the South.
yeah,
Ish.
it is the South. Yeah. And but you even see that with in bigger cities too, even to this day. You still see a lot of that, but it doesn't seem like spirituality or religion have much influence in the hospital other than in namesake. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. But I have to throw a movie quote thing out there for you. In Sons of Anarchy, there was a tiny little chapel in that hospital. So how often are people using it?
Exactly. There are chapels in hospitals, and I do see people at them. And it's fascinating because it's like
you still have the respect. It's a bunch of scientists in their own building, but they still respect the manner of.
Well, you're in there praying for your relative who's in the hospial, and you're praying that if the doctor can't get the job done, maybe a higher power can. It's really
yeah.
Kind of go into the boss, like, let me speak to your supervisor, please. It's kind of.
Can I talk to your manager?
I want to talk about something else. So, I hear a lot of people will talk about how we live in a country where we tend to lock up people in prisons and mental wards, and we do this more so than probably any other country in the world. Do we live in an incarceration culture? Do you see that? Is it just easier to lock away a problem child than it is to fix them and put them back out in society?
I don't necessarily think so, only in the manner of I've begun to study how it is, in other countries, and let's just say Europe. Why has the prevalence been different? And the only reason over there is because insurance is funky, and so they have people in institutions because what we believed was that they didn't want you in society. I think here, for a little bit, it was very much like that because, like you said, it was easy. But I think as I've gotten older and kind of seen more of what's happening, a lot of people are avoiding it. I mean, even being in Louisville, think about the Waverly Hills Hospital. I mean, there aren't as many institutional hospitals anyway because A, they're expensive and nobody wants to pay for it.
Yeah.
And B, the care in them is, let's be cliche, it's always horrid. The people don't want to work there, and I'd like to believe that we've stepped away from that only because of the prevalence of being diagnosed now and getting help. But again, I'm biased. I'm on the side who only sees the, hey, I'll help you.
Sure. Now, in the same vein, let's talk about the homeless. There are a lot of people that think
are people that haven't been on their bipolar medication and just need to get on medication? Yes.
Well, what I was going to say was in terms of like the homeless, but there are a lot of people that think homelessness is a drugs issue. People are homeless because they have drug problems, when it might more in fact be that people have mental illness issues instead, and that's what's made them homeless, aside from people that may have just really been down on their luck money-wise. If you look at the numbers of homeless, what is your take on the homeless? Is it a drug issue? Is it a mental illness issue? What creates the homeless? What do you do with the homeless?
Well, again, I'm going to have to throw the whole, how it happens to that specific person. If you look at where, let's say if we're going to actually look at the numbers of something, the opioid epidemic, only because I know we were saying we don't say with what happens relevance, but just taking this as a category. If you look at that and then look at the homeless population, are we looking at those correlations? Because that's the only way that I would agree, if that makes sense. It's hard to say that one thing causes another thing because there's so many different factors, there's so many different things that can be thrown in. We call it variables. It starts with a C. I'm so sorry. It's the end of the day. Confined variables. I mean, it's just, there's so many other things. It could be a person who, she's a single mom and she left her kids and she went, like, I listen to Crime Junkie stuff. I mean, she left her kids and went on prostitution and then is now homeless. I mean, there's so many different things that could make one homeless that it's hard to make one correlation to another. It's hard to say that only drugs cause homelessness. It's hard to say that only employment issues or IRS issues, bankruptcy. I mean, I feel like you can't just say finances, can't just say family, can't just say drugs. It's just, if that's it, say that I'm the homeless person and you want to give it strings, my string for drug may be longer than my finance issue, but both of those are still a reason why I'm here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I want to know, so I want to, toward the end here, I want to really kind of get into some deeper topics. So I wanted to ask you the concept of good and evil. Can people be born evil? Do you think it's something they acquire? In my book, in my Metacomics book, I talk about the alignments of people, the alignments of your soul, and how there's 9 alignments that would range from lawful good to chaotic evil and everything in between. And you fall into any of these 9 patterns. And I think people's alignments can change a little bit over time, and you can shift in and out of things. And I believe that you can be, you can be a lawful evil person, and you can be a chaotic good person. There's a lot of ways in which these things can be intermixed. But Absolutely. Can a person really just be born evil? Can they be rotten to the core from the start? Or is good and evil subject to perception? What is your take on good and evil?
Honestly, I'm not a really big fan. Like, I even say this in my parent training. I mean, I'm not a fan of the good versus evil because I'm not a black and white. There's a gray area. Mm-hmm. So I think, in a way, if you could have personality traits, I guess, if you want to say somebody's born with personality traits that just happen to be in your category of bad, but my category of bad could be different. So I could think they're great kids. They're just, they don't like you. Does that make sense? So it's like, and I agree with what you were saying, that it changes over time. So it's hard for me to answer, I have heard that some babies are born with brown eyes and they change to blue. Does that mean, is eye color good versus bad? Is it good? Is it good that they're blue now and it was bad that they're brown and that it changed? Or, your hair color changes. I think there is a nature and a nurture aspect. Yes. But it's also a perception. And that's where I think that your soul and where you can learn to accept that others may have a difference. It may not necessarily be good or bad. Why do I have to give it that? Why can't it be it's different than mine? There's
societal rules that dictate that, probably. I think it's interesting.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you get thrown into jail for a certain amount of reasons versus being free, and you could say that's good and bad. But I mean, I don't think any 6-year-old is thinking of raping a kid, and he may be the worst person ever when he grows up.
Right. I think it's interesting. People use evil to explain things that they don't understand in a way. And I think it's fascinating that, it's easy to, you may look at a Harvey Weinstein and say he's evil for his treatment of women, or you might look at a mass murderer and you look at them as being evil, and you'll call them that. And you'll say those people are the most evil people in the world. But if your brother murders someone, you'll never call him evil.
Not evil.
He's not evil, but everyone else that you can't explain is evil. And I think that that's an interesting kind of a dichotomy to this, is that the way people are billed and the way they use these words and the way this cancel culture exists today is really interesting. I believe that this is a sliding scale and that this stuff is subject to perception, mm-hmm. but we have the term.
Just like you said, I mean, you could do something here that somebody calls bad, but you could go to Australia and they think it's the greatest thing in the world. I mean, you could be a perfect peach and somebody doesn't like peaches.
In being a behavior specialist, or technician, or or whichever of the 9 job titles that you can use.
Yeah.
How does society decide what a socially important behavior is? How do we create that term? Like, if I'm boarding up.
The way that we look at it is it's called social validity. So it's, what is normal outside? I mean, I can't answer that question of who controls it and how they control it, because we all kind of control it. I mean, if a consistency of people wear shoes outside, everybody's going to wear shoes outside, even if I am the one who doesn't and is from Kentucky and never wears shoes outside. You see what I mean? It's more of, I believe it's more of a community, because each community is different. I mean, where you spend most of your time, like right now, the best thing that we can say is neighborhoods. A Lake Forest neighborhood is totally different than a West End Louisville neighborhood.
Right.
What they do and how their behavior has been shaped in that community is going to be totally different.
Right. That's true. I find the whole world of behavior and how these rules are set and these things are very fascinating to me. So I certainly wanted you to guest on my show so we could get into some different topics about these things. Do you, so the last couple of questions I want to just kind of talk to you about are just kind of out there questions, because I'm just curious, as Paige McCauley and not necessarily as a behavior specialist, how you feel about these things. Do you believe in ghosts?
I believe in spirits that are still lost here, yes.
Okay, which I call roaming souls in my book.
Okay, I didn't want to, I was going to say, listening to documentaries, they're kind of roaming souls, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, they're roaming souls, and there's different types of roaming souls for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think a roaming soul is? What do you think a spirit is?
What an interesting question. Well, I mean, I think it's a multitude of different things, just because of stories that you hear from different people. It could be a 6-year-old seeing a spirit that a 19-year-old also sees of their grandpa who had just died, and they both just happened to see him. But at the same time, somebody else could see a roaming soul that's been here for years.
Yeah.
That is, woken them up at 3 o'clock in the morning and is walking across their bedroom holding a lamp. I mean, I think those things depend on where you are, why they're, every own spirit has its own reason that's here. Sure.
So if you believe in a roaming soul, then you must believe in the existence of a soul.
That's a pretty accurate correlation, yes. I've never said it that way, but yes.
So I'm curious. So if souls, influence your decisions and your behaviors potentially, souls, there's, in my book, I talk about souls reincarnate, and you live your life a specific amount of times until you become an oversoul, or as a Buddhist would say, enlightened. Mm-hmm. And in my book, I do make some correlations to other religions that follow the same types of things, and even how it's kind of veiled in Christianity, that there is some concepts of reincarnation that exist within that. In my observations, I've seen a lot of issues with roaming souls, not finding their way back to come back or to move into another body, and a lot of reasons why that would be. But I also believe that there could be behavioral issues that happen with souls that reincarnate, particularly souls that recently lived their lives. And I was telling you this before we started the podcast, but like, for instance, right now, there's a 7-year-old boy in Cincinnati with the memories of a fireman who died in the 90s. And the thing is that I've dealt with so many case studies, and of the 300 or so that I actually talked about in the first printing of my book, the early draft of my book, and people that are coming on and guesting on my podcast, I had to sift through 600 that were crap, because it was a stage mom implanting things in their kids so their kid could be famous and on TV. Like, there was like a million instances where it was just fake. And
there's another motive happening.
Yeah. And a lot of disinformation campaigns and things, people that want to discredit. Like, that's the problem with a lot of research, is there's a lot of people that want to kind of salt your research. And so I got to be really careful with the case studies. And it's always interesting to come across something that's very real that you can work at. So I'll tell you this story, that because you might know this place being from Kentucky. So there was one of the worst one of the worst nightclub fires in history was in Kentucky. It was called the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire. Are you familiar with the story?
No, I don't think I've heard that one.
So this was in Kentucky, right across from Cincinnati, and the Beverly Hills Supper Club sat up on a hill and it overlooked the Cincinnati skyline. And this club had been built. I'm sorry, I'm having water, so I'm choking to death here.
It's okay.
So the Beverly Hills Supper Club was this opulent supper club that was built up on this hill, and I believe it had been built in the 30s. It had been around a long time. It burned in the 70s. Interesting fact about this is that my mother had gone to the Beverly Hills Supper Club the day before it burned down.
Oh, wow.
She's one of the last people to actually see it functioning. And she had gone, so there was a singer that was really popular in the 70s. His name was John Davidson. And he was playing a concert there. My mom was a fan of John Davidson and went to see the show, and that, came home and was all happy about the show. And then another day went by, and then she woke up, and in the newspaper was the Beverly Hills Supper Club burned down. She was immediately in tears. Like, it was crazy. I woke up, I'm a 9-year-old kid, and she's like sobbing because the place burned down, and she was just there. Like, if she had gone one day later, she would be dead.
She would have been.
So what happened was, there was a wiring issue that set the walls on fire. And then because the building was so old, the different little cabaret showrooms were filled with like cushions and chairs that had toxic materials. None of the
drapes. Man, that blew up so quick.
It did. It blew up quick. And the worst part, this was pre-code days where you had to have buildings built a certain way. All the doors opened inward. So when they found the bodies, they were stacked 20 high because no one could get the doors open. Nobody. So everyone just died in this place from toxic fumes, not being able to get out. And because of that nightclub fire, a lot of regulations were changed across the country to make sure that exit doors would go outward and that there were clear ways for people to evacuate. And there were more than one exit. Like, it was massive casualties.
Wow.
And, but it was always under mysterious circumstances that it happened. So there was a show called Psychic Kids that was on A&E. And I'm not going to name the psychic kid because he's going to be a guest on another show. But I worked with a psychic kid from that show who was in touch. I mean, he was a Sixth Sense kid, okay?
Oh, wow.
And, but, really the thing was I was like, you got to test the waters a little bit. He was 16 when I worked with him. He was like 12 or 13 when he was on the A&E show. And in his backstory and all this, I'm going to save for a future episode when he comes on the show. But he was troubled as a child because he was seeing so many different spirits. And the school wanted to kick him out, and then it took a while to figure out what he was doing and how he was communicating. And a lot of young kids have a tendency to see angels. They see spirits. They see these things, and where we kind of lose that ability as we get older. So this kid was like really in touch, and he would tell me his process, what it was like. And he would explain it to me like this. He said, so imagine yourself walking down the street, and someone would be walking down the other side of the street. Mm-hmm. In most cases, the person walking down the other side of the street would not acknowledge you. That's what it's like for him seeing the spirit world. And he said sometimes someone would walk past him and they would make eye contact with him, but they wouldn't know how to communicate with him. And he said in other times someone would make eye contact with him and move toward him and want to say something to him to pass a message on. Huh. And that was the way it worked with him communicating. So I had taken him to some different locations that I wanted him to, tell me what he saw or what was happening. But the places that we had gone to prior to the Beverly Hills Supper Club, he knew where they were at. And I was wondering if maybe he was salting the story because he could research it But when I took him to the Beverly Hills Supper Club, he didn't know where he was going. So
at least you got the confirmation.
Yeah, so we videotaped the entire process. So on top of the hill, the remains of the building are still there. So there's a lot of like sapling trees. It was never redeveloped. The road still goes up to it. It's still very flat. There's still some foundational elements that are there. There's a lot of people that have like tacked things to the trees that tell you where certain ballrooms were at and what the death counts were. And there's still artifacts that are there. There's like tile from the floors in the bathrooms, and there's like a wrought iron staircases there. The safe from the office was there. There's a makeshift shrine. They built a big cross up on the hill that you can see from Cincinnati side of the river. So there's a big monument up there. So I took him up there and he walked around between all these sapling trees having conversations. It was fascinating to watch him. From 30 feet away, I could tell he was talking to people and he was communicating. And he would come back and he would tell me stories about particular people. He would have names. He would talk about how people tried to escape. He talked about how the owners of the place were in a dispute and how one of the owners went and messed with all the wiring.
Oh, wow.
He had so much data from it that there's no way he could have never found on his own.
No.
So I cross-referenced all the stuff on all the stories he told me, and it was all accurate. And there was always a conspiracy theory around the fact that the owners were in an argument, and one of the owners wanted to burn the place down so he could get an insurance settlement. Now, the owners are long dead, so we'll never know. But it was so interesting to me how he could come up with names of people that were fatalities.
That were there.
And would tell me who they were. It was really incredible to see. And that's one of the case studies I'm telling you about. Like one of the 300 that I consider to be valid is really interesting, you know, and why these people are so troubled and why they wanted to leave messages. And although this particular boy, he didn't have the power to send people on, there are shamans and different types of people out there that can open a way for people to go back to the guff, and they can go back to
where they're supposed to, yeah.
And there are ways that can happen, but it was really interesting to me. So I've gotten way off our topics and our subjects, but I wanted to share that story because it's really interesting to me. So what I think is interesting is a lot of people like this kid in Cincinnati I was telling you about. A lot of people are coming back with memories of past lives, and we're having it more today than has ever happened in history. And it's more current memories that people are remembering, and not so much like the past life experiences people had 50 years ago or 100 years ago when they were living in feudal Japan or in medieval Europe someplace. You know, now it's more recent memories. And I often wonder, and I'm curious on your opinion on this, and you can answer this or not answer this, but I wonder if people having past lives that were recent, if this is part of the problems with people's gender identity issues, and whether you may have literally just lived your life as a female and you're back in a male body and you're having trouble adapting to that and you don't know why. And I think I'm curious, you know, is this a behavioral thing, identity? And is it happening to kids young? Is it something that's happening older when they're seeing the world and they're seeing pop culture and being influenced by things? What is your take on that today?
I will answer it in my experiences only because I feel like that's the only valid information that I can give on the topic. Mm-hmm. I have seen and nannied and worked with children at young ages that have shown behaviors of, for a male, being more feminine. You know, I think there is a nature and a nurture aspect. I can't disagree with I believe in reincarnation in a certain aspect. So I feel like I want to agree, but at the same time, I don't have enough information. I don't like to say I agree or disagree, only because I like to have all of the facts that I can have, if that makes sense. But
well, yeah, I mean, I'm giving you a theory. It's just a theory. Yeah. There's no science yet behind it.
It sounds really good, though. I like it.
It's because I'm trying to see how science explains this away, because that's what
it would like to do.
Honestly, in my science, it doesn't explain any of it. That's why it's like it's sad that I can't even give you any other answer other than my experiences. I've seen it in a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I think there's a nature and a nurture. I do think now it is yes, very more common and more acceptable in a sense, but I also think there is a biological as well.
Yeah. Interesting. That's fascinating. Paige, I'm really happy that you came on the show. We can wrap it up at this point. And,
thanks for having me.
How can people find you? Are you on social media? Are you out there? Do you have a website?
Yes. I mean, I'm not the greatest millennial, but I do have an Instagram. I'm not the most hip happening, and I should probably have a Twitter, and I do not. I think I've deleted it like 4 times.
Yeah. People get fed up with it and they delete it and then they wind up going back. It's funny.
I did that and then I just gave up. So
I don't make a lot of Twitter posts. I don't, but I do try to share my personal adventures on Instagram when I can. But but you're kind of like you're my contact in the Midwest these days because I'm seldom back there, and I'm in New York now, and I always like to hear. In fact, it seems like the heart of the news is Kentucky these days. It seems like that state gets a lot of traction on the national scene right now.
Hey, you know how much Louisville is behind. Maybe this will help us update a lot of things.
And you just only moved south a little bit. So tell me,
I thought I was going so much further and I didn't.
So tell me, where exactly does the South begin? Does it begin in Tennessee? Because I've never really been clear where that line is at.
Honestly, living in Kentucky and being and now living in Tennessee and also living in the north of Illinois, I think there's some sort of a random hillbilly line in the middle of Kentucky. Because, man, you hit anywhere south of Louisville and Fort Knox, and I mean, you in the boonies.
Yeah. So where's the line between redneck and hillbilly?
I don't think there is one.
I think there's a difference.
It matters with the number of teeth is my answer.
I need a scientific explanation on what defines a redneck versus a hillbilly. Because someone told me one time the North had rednecks and the South had hillbillies. So I think this is a case study, the paper we need to write.
Yes.
Maybe it is based on number of teeth. It could be. This is terrible.
I mean, that's all I can give you. Is if there's less teeth, I think they're more of a redneck.
We're really bringing up the worst traits of Kentucky. Earlier in the conversation, when you commented on bare feet in Kentucky in the same sentence, I thought that was kind of funny.
I get made fun of my significant other. I hate saying boyfriend because I've lived with him for like a year. He makes fun of me for my Kmart feet because I have to wear shoes in the summer.
I just call it Fred Flintstone feet. You know, that's what.
In Kentucky, ain't nobody care if you don't have shoes on, but apparently anywhere in Tennessee, they care.
That's funny. That's funny. All right, Paige, I really appreciate you joining me today. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Hopefully you come back down the line and we have some other social topics we can get into, and we'll keep going. We'll keep talking. That's what we got to do. The world's got to keep talking.
Absolutely. I'm here, and hopefully I didn't steer away any audience. Sorry, y'all. I'm super weird.
No, it's fun. I want a young person on this because I think really Metacomics is grabbing a younger audience. And I don't want to have the dinosaurs of the industry in this podcast. I have to hear how, I didn't mean to catch you up. Go ahead, say what you were going to say.
Oh, that was it. I was just rambling. I'm sorry.
No, but I want the voices of young people because there's a lot of youth that are kind of lost in spirituality. And I like young professionals like you that have a fresh approach because you're straight out of college. Like I've dealt with too many people and I see their medical degree and it says they graduated in 1974. And unless these people are brilliant, I think you need a fresh approach to things. And
I'm happy to give you a different perspective.
Yeah, and that's why I really appreciate having you on here and just kind of talking about behavior and what it's like in your world And obviously your world is different than like a medical doctor and other people in other professions in this industry. But I wanted to really kind of get your take on some of this stuff. And if anything, we're educating the listener in kind of what these things are and what you do and where this fits in an overall spectrum of what happens.
I love behavior, and I absolutely love what I do. So I am here.
Great. We're glad you're here. So perfect. Well, you have a good evening, Paige. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Paige. That's the smartest woman I know from Kentucky. I have a lot of great guests coming up in the weeks to come. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to Quest. Please be sure and rate and review this podcast. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Be sure to visit the official website for the International Association of Metatomics at metatomics.org, or find us on social media for other unique content. And make sure to pick up a copy of the book that started a spiritual revolution, Metatomics, The Grand Design, available for sale online and at most major bookstores. Thanks for listening.